Okay, go ahead.
All right, thank you everyone for coming today. I'm really glad that we're having this meeting between the CDC and HWO. This is going to be a meeting of equals. We're all going to give our thoughts and opinions on it, and I just want to get everyone's opinions. We do have a couple things to discuss, a couple things on our agenda that we are proposing that we would like to get everyone's opinion on. So to start off, the three things are we're going to look at a safe sex practice for 6 months for anyone traveling to these affected areas. The second is we're going to look at recommendations to avoid pregnancy for the current year. And lastly, we also want to look at whether the World Cup for soccer in Moscow should go ahead, or if we should intervene and perhaps cancel it. So would anyone like to begin? I think we'll start first with the safe sex practices. So the opinion of CDC, or at least my opinion, is that we should kind of encourage a safe sex practice for at least 6 months for all people who are traveling to these affected areas. I think that it's very important that we contain the potential spread. And if we focus a lot on prevention, then we'll have far fewer cases of Zika in the future.
Coming from the WHO, my opinion, and some of us from the WHO, I think it's a bit difficult to kind of implement these safe sex practices that are recommended for 6 months. I definitely see where you guys are coming from the CDC. However, we think this is a bit unrealistic for all people traveling to these affected areas.
I agree with her because, we can't recommend to all the people who flies to Africa to do safe sex for 6 months. It's annoying.
I mean, we're not enforcing it, we're recommending it. So it's really up to, the people themselves. All we can do is kind of educate people that there are risks involved in unsafe sex practices, particularly with Zika.
And how do you plan to educate these people? Like, what type of programs are you guys thinking of doing?
Well, as a senior associate director of the CDC, I think that having the recommendation of sex practices is cheap, is not difficult to achieve, and is safe for AIDS and other infections in the area, and it will diminish a lot the risk of spreading the virus that could have a potential fatal outcome for babies born with microcephaly. I think the outcome is really something that we should think about it. For something that is a safe recommendation that everybody should take if it's conscious about health. So I agree with Adina, our director, and I support this measure should be taken.
I just want to highlight that, especially in African public health programs, there are a lot of messages going out about safe sexual practices, and I think that we just want to be careful that Zika is not a very widespread on the African continent right now, and I think we should be a little bit careful of what recommendations we're providing on the African continent around sex practices, especially looking at how widespread it is.
So what would you recommend?
I think that it would need a little bit more review at this point.
All right, thank you. Does anybody else have any other opinions on this 6-month recommendation?
Again, in Africa, it's not only using condoms for who are traveling in Africa for 6 months, and also in Africa they already implement so many interventions to do safe sex using condoms, but still not success. How you can tell these people use a condom for 6 months right now to avoid Zika? It's not possible.
Oh, I disagree. I think it is possible and it is cheap with a very good information campaign about the risks, and it's for people that are traveling and are concerned about not getting infections that could have a fatal outcome. So I think this recommendation is not bothersome and it's needed and should be promoted.
How are you going to promote this?
Well, with all the people that is traveling, we have to, you can make an alarm in the country that is this risk, and you can facilitate maybe having condoms available in the hotels, in the places that the tourists go, in the bathrooms of the bars and discos. No sé, I don't know, even just information concerning this, that this is something that they should be aware, especially women that are planning and people that are planning to have family.
Yeah, but we should be careful that the more alarms you sound, the less people listen to them. And so I would just keep that in mind, that it's a bigger issue than just a public awareness campaign.
And also how many people are aware of the condoms, like, I mean, it's an African country, like, it's not just like the men is traveling to protect themselves, it's also women are traveling, and so many women maybe not uneducated, are not aware of condoms, so how are we going to promote this, like, I mean, it's just like selling a condoms or giving a condoms, it's not like implemented.
I think giving information, brochures, is setting information on the websites of, I agree with Becca that it's not an easy thing to do, but making an alarm should be taken into account because of the fatal outcome, because it's a fatal outcome for the babies. So you have to take that into account. It's not something that is just concerned about your health, but a health of the baby. So, that could be a spreading epidemics that we cannot know what will be the consequences of this. So we have to contain it. So we have to do something. We cannot just stand there and say it's difficult. Condoms are not expensive. It's an easy measure, and it's easy to focus our campaign on that issue.
Yeah, I definitely understand where you're coming from, and I know a recommendation and education is sort of one thing, but actual condom use is another. I mean, a lot of people are educated on the importance of condom use, but still aren't using condoms, so I just don't know how strong the recommendation will actually be to make an impact.
I think making a recommendation is not expensive. It's a recommendation. They have the possibility to decide. They are autonomous. But we have our duty to prevent an epidemic spreading of something that has a potential fatal outcome for babies born with microcephalia and all the expenses that come with them and all the problems aligned with that.
But you should understand, it's like an individual choice to use a condom or not. You can't to tell a command that people have to use a condom for 6 months who are traveling to Africa.
It's not a command, it's a recommendation. Recommendation
I'd
is
like
I recommend you to do
point.
this. Yes.
I'll let you finish, but I'll make a point once you finish.
No, I think a recommendation is that you set the data, you set the possibility of a fatal outcome, and they will decide. But at least us, as the Center of Control of Disease, we have to be responsible and accountable of doing something about it. We just not can sit there.
But I really disagree with this.
Okay.
I'd like to just put in that Zika is not only found in Africa. We're also seeing a very large outbreak in South America, and they're spread to other countries as well. So I think what we really need to focus on is, rather than the people who are living in those countries, we need to focus on people who are traveling to those countries, who are there temporarily and are at greater risk for picking up Zika while they're there and then bringing it to their home country. So perhaps we should implement some kind of educational programs, perhaps in the airports, perhaps in travel agencies, so we can educate people about the Zika virus and how it spreads, how people are affected by it, and what are the risks. So it might not be a risk to the person themselves, but if they are thinking about having a family in the future, then they should have the tools to make those decisions on whether they want to practice safe sex or not.
Totally agree.
Let's go to the second point.
Yes, all right, so let's move on. So our second topic on the agenda that I want to get everyone's opinion on is whether we should make a recommendation that women should avoid getting pregnant until at least 2020 for all those who are living in the affected areas. So we're not talking anymore about travelers, we're talking about people who are living in the areas affected by Zika.
I'm opposed to this recommendation. I think it's extremely paternalistic and difficult to set this recommendation, especially in the affected areas in Africa. I mean, families are used to having multiples of children, so setting this type of recommendation, I don't even think will necessarily even be noted by people living in the affected areas, necessarily.
Well, I disagree with what you said. I do agree with our director of the CDC, because you are talking about the affected areas and the possibility of getting the infection is very high, and there is not ones that get the infection and doesn't have the outcome. The outcome is there every time a person that has the virus in their blood and is pregnant, she will deliver a baby with these congenital fetal malformations. So I think we should do this recommendation. Women who are planning to get pregnant, they should know that they have this high risk because they are in an infected area.
What do people think about recommending that people avoid pregnancy if they think that they're affected, but not necessarily putting a date on it? So taking out the until 2020.
That is
part
a
of
wise
the
thing,
recommendation.
because we could have controlled this in less than
That
a
might
year.
work for a time, but for how long? Will it work for 3 months? Will it work for 6 months? We need to know, how long is Zika going to remain in their blood? How long are they at risk for transferring Zika to their infant? So I think, a year is not so drastic. If people are looking forward to, building a family, then I think 1 year is not so drastic a recommendation. And also, we're looking at a very large population at risk. We're talking about infants who have no protection in the womb against this virus. And although we know that this will have impact, socially, economically, it is kind of difficult to implement. I think that implementing or recommending that women avoid pregnancy for the year, I think that benefits will outweigh any possible negative impacts. I think we'll see a very good prevention against Zika.
I really disagree with this, because the people who travel to Africa, it's not just like a business purpose. They also, for the couples who got married, they want to spend a time in Africa. And how come you say to avoid the pregnancies?
We're not talking about forever, we're talking about a year. So you might be planning to have a family, but if you can push it off for a year, maybe for your own health and also for the health of your future family, what kind of future are you building if you get pregnant right away and your baby is at a very high risk for severe malformation where the baby is not even going to live? Wouldn't it be safer to wait a year to ensure that you're no longer at risk for Zika, and then begin building your family and knowing that your baby is at much less risk?
And besides, you have always the opportunity to have your honeymoon in another place that is not an affected area. Just if you go to that affected area, to be accountable, to be responsible, that you have to avoid pregnancy. Even though this, I agree with this, we could have into account what Becca said, because maybe not setting a date, just saying while this is contained, so people won't get so desperate and about the measure taking a year, but maybe say we have to avoid pregnancy until we decide there is no risk anymore. Maybe that could help more people will take the measure. That is something that we can think about.
So you're going to announce who got married not to travel to Africa?
But this isn't about
we're talking about
living-
people who live in these places, who live in affected areas.
So are you supposing some sort of educational program for families and women living in Africa so that they're educated on this and understand?
If we can get the healthcare providers involved when women come to the healthcare providers to talk about family planning in any way, I think if we give the healthcare providers the resources to be able to discuss it with families, at least they will have some knowledge of what their risks are and how they should proceed.
Let's advance to the third.
All right, we'll move on to the last topic, which some of you might be soccer fans. The World Cup is coming up in Moscow. I personally think that it would be a better idea to perhaps cancel it this year, as heartbreaking as that may be. But I think we really want to limit the potential spread. We know that when people are at sports events, there is a lot of alcohol involved. There's a lot of high emotions, perhaps poor decisions. People are not necessarily thinking as clearly as they normally would. So I think when you have this big kind of conglomeration of people from all over the world, we really want to do what we can to limit potential spread of such a dangerous virus. So I would propose that we cancel the World Cup this year.
I'd have to disagree with that. The World Cup brings, a lot of money for Moscow, and I don't think people have the choice if they want to attend the event or not. But I still think that the actual World Cup can continue, and I don't think we can really, blame alcohol for people's poor decisions necessarily. But I think that the World Cup should continue and not be cancelled. I mean, people can choose to come or not to Moscow for the World Cup or watch it at home on their TV, but it does bring a lot of income for the country, and so I don't think we can just cancel the event.
I also agree because I'm a soccer fan. It's not only just a soccer fan as I do it, I say like when people looking for it, the sports, they're waiting for the soccer. Like it's really should be happen. It's not like being cancelled for just like a reason of Zika virus. If the people traveling from Africa, they need to be scanned before to travel.
And I mean, we saw sort of a similar thing for the Olympics in Brazil.
Yes.
In Rio.
Yes.
It was, the athletes' decision if they were to come and participate. And I know some athletes did pull out because they didn't want to, have a chance of infecting their wives. And people, they chose to either come to the Olympics or not. It was up to them. And those Olympics still ran.
Oh, I'm sorry, but I absolutely think that it was very well said. What Adina said, I supported. There is no need to take such a huge risk of epidemic spreading of this virus with bad consequences, very bad consequences. So I do agree, and she exposed it completely well.
I just think we should go back and look at the data of how much Zika is actually spreading and how big a threat this is before any decision is made.
I want to say to my colleagues that you're amazing professionals, but in this case, in these free arguments and recommendation, I agree with the CDC, and I think we should reconsider everything they suggested, because safe sex practices is something that should be recommended always to everyone. It's not only about Zika. So I think it's important. I think that we should recommend to people avoid pregnancy. It might be some ethical issues with that, but it makes sense, and we are focusing on health. And I think we should consider this recommendation as well as the World Cup. Might be complicated, but puts a lot of people in risk. So I think we are making a really good job. We should also consider what they are saying. I agree with this recommendation.
I think for the World Cup, I don't think we need to go as far as cancel it, but maybe make a recommendation for those who are planning to travel. Let them know and make them aware of the Zika virus, and then it's left to their decision if they want to attend the World Cup or not.
I think that's a fairly reasonable suggestion.
Yes, I think if the first two recommendations are accepted, then the third one we could manage it with recommendations, and maybe it could be done. As you said, they have the choice to attend or not to attend.
Okay, let's stop. Thank you all.